Watch out.
Hard to believe. Thanks, Jesse. Still no memo. President Trump's chief of staff says the controversial surveillance document is coming, but the FBI officially does not want you to see it. A train carrying Republican lawmakers to a retreat crashes in West Virginia, killing one person. Investigators are on the scene. Plus, we go back to Michigan for Heartland's State of the Union reaction. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. We are coming to you tonight from Fox News World Headquarters in New York. Our top story is about 250 miles outside Washington, D.C. One person is dead, and a lot of Republican lawmakers are shaken up after a train carrying them to a political retreat hit a truck on the railroad tracks near the Virginia border with West Virginia. Several people on board that train taken to hospitals, and naturally, right after it happened, questions started about whether this was an accident or something else. Correspondent Peter Ducey has the latest tonight from White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. Almost 3 hours into a chartered train ride from Washington, D.C. to West Virginia, lawmakers were jolted. They heard a loud noise. The cars quickly screeched from 70 to 0, according to one member, and that is because their ride to a retreat collided with a garbage truck on the tracks in the town of Crozet. Within minutes, as a strong electrical smell filled the cabins, the Capitol Police pleaded with any physicians on board to administer first aid to the most seriously injured. And that is when a handful of legislators turned into lifesavers. Among the doctors on board, Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, Ohio Congressman Brad Wenstrup, Texas Congressman Michael Burgess, Tennessee Congressman Phil Rowe, and Kansas Congressman Roger Marshall, who told us two of the passengers in the truck required the most urgent attention, but that one could not be saved.
Dr. Rowe and I could not find a pulse, and his pupils were fixed and dilated, and thought it was best to call that code and move all of our attention back to the first victim.
5 train passengers were taken to the University of Virginia Hospital for head injuries, including a staffer for House Speaker Paul Ryan and a representative from Minnesota, Congressman Jason Lewis, who was evaluated for a concussion and tells Fox, quote, "I'm fine compared to, tragically, the truck drivers, and thankful for the prompt action of our doctors and first responders. My thoughts are with the family of the individual who passed away." Back in D.C., meanwhile, the president, who was briefed, says it's going to be a while until authorities know how a truck ended up on the tracks in front of a heavily guarded train.
We don't have a full understanding yet as to what happened, but it was a train hitting a truck going at a pretty good speed, and we'll have a full report.
At the point of impact, the badly damaged engine car was eventually removed, and the remaining cars were towed backwards to a train station in downtown Charlottesville, where Republicans were quickly loaded onto buses for a drive to their planned retreat.
And certainly a somber mood. Obviously, we're concerned about those who are seriously injured and the deceased, and then some who are pretty bruised up. Somebody just walked back and got a cut on their hand. I think we're all Labrador. Others who were up at that time. It was quite a jolt.
We were there. The transfer from train cars to buses in Charlottesville was tense at times because state and local authorities were not expecting to have half of Congress drop by the middle of a college town in the middle of the day. Lawmakers that I have spoken to are upset about what happened, but they are here now trying to refocus on their 2018 agenda. Brett.
Peter, thank you. There are strong indications tonight that you will get to see a classified memo that Republicans say details surveillance abuses by the intelligence community during its investigation of the Trump presidential campaign. But so far, that document is still under lock and key. The FBI director is pushing back publicly, saying this memo should not come out. And tonight we learned just how raw emotions were in the House Intelligence Committee meeting Monday. about this memo. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has some amazing quotes tonight. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brett. Late today, the House Intelligence Committee released the 51-page transcript that shows Monday's vote to release the Republican drafted memo was acrimonious, at times bitter, with allegations flying from Democrats. In this exchange, Congressman Mike Quigley presses Committee Chairman Devin Nunes over whether he coordinated with the White House. Quigley, did they have any idea you were doing this? Did they talk about doing this with you? Did you suggest it to them? Nunes, I would just answer, as far as I know, no. And I would also say that we are well aware that the minority has not wanted to conduct this investigation by the public opposition to the subpoenas that we issued back in August that were clearly looking into matters of FISA abuse. In a statement after the transcript's release, the committee's ranking Democrat Adam Schiff highlighted the passage because a follow-up question about staff coordination was not answered. Earlier today, the feud between the FBI, Justice Department, and Capitol Hill took a new turn, with the Bureau issuing a rare public statement claiming the 4-page memo is misleading and incomplete because facts are missing. It reads in part, the FBI was provided a limited opportunity to review this memo the day before the committee voted to release it. As expressed during our initial review, we have grave concerns about material omissions of fact that fundamentally impact the memo's accuracy. Nunes quickly disputed the claim and seized on how long it took the FBI and Justice Department, facing contempt of Congress, to comply. Having stonewalled Congress's demands for information for nearly a year, it's no surprise to see the FBI and DOJ issue spurious objections to allowing the American people to see information related to surveillance abuses at these agencies. And in what appears to be a reference to the Trump dossier funded by the Clinton campaign and DNC, Nunes continues, it's clear that top officials used unverified information in a court document to fuel a counterintelligence investigation during an American political campaign. FBI Director Christopher Wray and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein were at the White House earlier this week, and a source close to the matter says both men have voiced their concerns about the memo, with Rosenstein, quote, pushing back hard. The president seemed to make his feelings known after State of the Union.
Let's release the memo.
Don't worry, 100%.
The committee had no comment today on a possible timing for the release of the memo, and in the last few minutes we've gotten some new information that gives us some context on FBI Director Christopher Wray's review on Capitol Hill Sunday of the 4-page memo. We're now told he had an hour and a half, so 90 minutes, to look at that 4-page document. Brett.
Okay, Catherine, more on this with the panel. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There is little evidence tonight of a bipartisan awakening following last night's call for unity in President Trump's first State of the Union speech. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts looks at the president's efforts to reach across the aisle and how they were received. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. You know, many times in the past, presidents have hit the road immediately after the State of the Union address to sell their policies that were included in the speech across the nation. President Trump preferred to stay here at the White House and let the themes of his speech marinate for a while.
The President of the United States.
President Trump got high marks from Republicans for his State of the Union address, a speech in which he extended an olive branch to Democrats.
Tonight, I am extending an open hand to work with members of both parties, Democrats and Republicans, to protect our citizens of every background, color, religion, and creed.
Finding a fix for DACA is the most urgent priority. Protections for so-called dreamers end on March the 5th. President Trump last night presented what he called a down-the-middle compromise.
A detailed proposal that should be supported by both parties as a fair compromise, one where nobody gets everything they want, but where our country gets the critical reforms it needs and must have.
The deal offers a path to citizenship for 1.8 million dreamers, 3 times the number of people President Obama protected. But Democrats say the trade-offs over border security, chain migration, and the visa lottery are something they just won't swallow.
It was dangerous what he said last night, and it has instilled fear, as I say over and over. What he is doing brings tears to the eyes of the Statue of Liberty and instills fear in the hearts of people who are concerned about our dreamers.
It is also time to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure.
President Trump also hopes to build bipartisan support for a $1.5 trillion infrastructure program.
Every federal dollar should be leveraged by partnering with state and local governments and, where appropriate, tapping into private sector investment to permanently fix the infrastructure deficit.
But Democrats, who are on the record as supporting infrastructure renewal, blew a raspberry at that one, too, calling the proposal, quote, puny.
President Trump tried to put a fresh coat of paint on a failing presidency. It didn't work. Americans see through the rhetoric and understand the reality.
Democrats sat on their hands much of the night, refusing to acknowledge items like a historic low for African-American unemployment and corporate bonuses for employees, a byproduct of tax reform that President Trump highlighted today, inviting workers from 5 states to the Oval Office.
We have some companies that have announced 3,000 bonuses, and in some cases even more. Some have given raises to the minimum wage up to $12, $13, $14, and even $15.
Divisions with Democrats continued today over the White House's planned release of the Republican FISA memo. In a radio interview with Fox and Friends' Brian Kilmeade, Chief of Staff John Kelly saying the sooner it's out, the better.
It'll be released here pretty quick, I think, and the whole world can see it.
There were some moments during the State of the Union that brought both sides to their feet. Congress paying tribute to many of the guests invited by the White House, including a North Korean defector, a tortured amputee, whose raised crutches in defiance became the face of North Korean oppression last night. And some late developing news with that FISA memo. A senior administration official tells Fox News that late yesterday, before the president left for the State of the Union address, 5 career officials from the FBI came over to discuss the memo and view it with the Chief of Staff, John Kelly. The FBI official, or at least FBI officials, had seen an earlier version of that. They were concerned about the contents of it, particularly in the subject of sources and methods. I'm told the version that they saw last night had been changed somewhat from the version that they were concerned about earlier, but yet the FBI still went ahead and released that statement of concern, Brett. So we'll keep chasing this one for you here.
Okay, more on this with the panel. John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. An estimated 46 million people tuned in to watch the State of the Union address on television last night, according to Nielsen ratings. Fox News Channel was Americans' #1 choice on television, broadcast, or cable. 11.5 million people watched here on Fox News, making it the most watched State of the Union address in the history of cable news. We thank you for watching. Hillary Clinton says she should have fired a senior campaign advisor accused of sexual harassment in 2007. Clinton posted an explanation on Facebook last night, just minutes before the president's State of the Union speech. Last week, the New York Times reported Clinton rejected a recommendation from her senior staff to get rid of faith-based advisor Burns Strider after several sexual harassment allegations had surfaced. One of the most high-profile Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill is getting out of politics. South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, who is a former federal prosecutor, says he is returning to the justice system. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel tells us tonight Gowdy's announcement comes amid partisan warfare with no end in sight and a midterm election looming.
I call upon all of us to set aside our differences.
Republican leaders hope President Trump's effort to reach across the aisle would lead to lawmakers finding areas of cooperation. But top House Democrats are not changing their tune.
Unfortunately, one evening's speech doesn't erase a conflict-ridden, chaotic year that has driven our country even further apart.
GOP leaders are facing a wave of retirements with news that House Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy intends to retire after this term. Gowdy is one of 9 House committee chairs announcing they won't seek re-election, so their focus is on getting things done, not the rigors of a campaign. Republican lawmakers intend to set their agenda for the rest of 2018, trying to leave unified on what can be accomplished.
We will be spending extended time around the infrastructure question, workforce development, as well as the budget process itself.
One area expected to attract Democrat support is on rebuilding the nation's crumbling infrastructure.
We've been through so many other battles that we haven't had the time to get into the details on infrastructure. Hopefully we get the ability to start putting the real meat on the bone.
But the House Democrat leader mocked the president's proposal.
The president presents himself as a man of big ideas, and then he presents a lame, puny infrastructure proposal.
facing a government funding deadline next week and a DACA deadline in early March. A key Senate Republican says it's time for Democrats to get serious.
We have to do something on the border, and we want to make sure that on March 5th or whenever, we don't have 670,000 people that are in school or currently employed lose their work status.
Adding to the deadline pressure, the Congressional Budget Office said late today lawmakers would likely need to raise the debt ceiling in early March. The previous estimate was Congress had until late March or early April. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. New Jersey Democrat Senator Bob Menendez is off the legal hook tonight. The federal government will not retry Menendez on corruption charges. This comes after a judge threw out several bribery counts. Here's senior correspondent Rick Leventhal.
The Justice Department spent nearly 5 years investigating New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez on allegations of corruption and bribery. His trial last fall at the federal courthouse in Newark lasted 11 weeks before a jury said it was hopelessly deadlocked and a mistrial declared in November.
I just wish there was stronger evidence right out of the gate where, you know, it was a victimless crime, I think.
Despite the threat of a retrial, the senator was boldly confident that day.
To those who were digging my political grave so that they could jump into my seat, I know who you are, and I won't forget you.
He was accused of trading his political influence for hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions, accepting free trips, hotel suites, and rides on a private jet, courtesy of wealthy eye doctor Salomon Melgen, who was convicted in a separate case of health care fraud and is now awaiting sentencing. Earlier this month, federal prosecutors said they'd retry Menendez. Then a judge threw out some of the counts against him. And even though the senator still faced 11 charges of bribery, fraud, and conspiracy, the feds announced they're dismissing the case, leading Menendez to release this statement. From the very beginning, I never wavered in my innocence and my belief that justice would prevail. I am grateful that the Department of Justice has taken the time to reevaluate its case and come to the appropriate conclusion. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano says he was stunned by the news.
The court pared down the charges and in doing so actually got rid of the garbage that the government should have gotten rid of and made it a stronger case. This was virtually a slam dunk second time around.
Throughout his trial, Menendez said he still planned to seek re-election this fall. Not having corruption charges hanging over his head could help him keep the seat he's held since 2006. Brett?
Rick, thanks. When we come back, the markets rebound after big losses.
Link at Vistaprint.com.
A federal appeals court is upholding the structure of the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The panel says it is constitutional to bar the president from firing the bureau director at will. President Trump removed the agency's acting director last fall and replaced her with Budget Office Chief Mick Mulvaney. Currently, both are still reporting to work at the agency every day. Today's ruling overturns a 2016 decision that had given presidents the power of dismissal over the director. Stocks were back in positive territory today after major losses Tuesday. The Dow gained 72.5. The S&P 500 picked up 1. The Nasdaq gained 9. Yesterday's news of a new healthcare company from Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, and J.P. Morgan Chase shook up the markets and really the entire healthcare industry. Tonight, Deirdre Bolton of Fox Business Network joins us, or I join her, really, with what people are saying today.
It's so nice to see you here and indoors. Not that the shot wasn't beautiful last evening.
Yes,
but,
it's a little chilly.
More comfortable here.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so the markets, I mean, listen, they closed off the highs, but we had the statement from the Fed, rates on hold. But the indication is we are going to see some rates going higher, which essentially means it just becomes more expensive for corporations or even us if we take a house loan or car loan to pay. So that sometimes puts a little bit of water on the stock market. But we're watching these healthcare stocks, and this is an amazing story. I mean, you mentioned it. So it's Amazon, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Berkshire Hathaway saying, you know what, it's really expensive for our employees. We're paying a lot of money for their health insurance. We're going to form a non-profit. And they haven't even really been that much more specific than that, but they are going to try to tackle healthcare. Now, together, these three companies have about 1 million employees. So they have a lot of weight. They have a lot of muscle. And once you say Amazon, I mean, it's like, do you remember in August when Amazon bought Whole Foods for close to $14 billion? I mean, the markets just kind of went crazy. All these grocery store stocks went down, and that's what we're seeing with healthcare stocks. So I can go through a few of them. A few did actually recuperate after yesterday, but a few more continued to move lower. So essentially, it seems like these three companies, JP Morgan Chase, Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon, they're going to form this nonprofit. It doesn't even start until December, but just the fact that they're announcing this is pressuring this whole healthcare group greatly. And, you know, with Amazon's technology, it's probably going to give some other insurers a run for their money.
That's interesting. So, I mean, the future of healthcare is kind of in flux here as Washington tries to figure out what to do. Companies are deciding what to do on their own.
Well, I think that is the most amazing point, you know, because when we often talk about single payer healthcare, a lot of people, especially conservatives, say, no, that's close to socialism. But essentially, in many ways, we're looking at that, but just offered through corporations instead of through the government. So it seems like the private sector is maybe solving a problem that the public sector or the government can't.
Okay. Deirdre, as always, thank you.
Sure thing.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he does not think President Trump will withdraw the U.S. from NAFTA. Trudeau told a Winnipeg radio station scrapping the trade deal would hurt U.S. workers and industries. Foreign ministers from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico will meet Friday to discuss talks aimed at revising the agreement, which President Trump has called a disaster. The director for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has resigned because of financial conflicts of interest. Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald had been on the job since July. A statement from the Department of Health and Human Services says Fitzgerald's complex financial interests had caused conflicts that made it difficult to do her job. We've been talking about the State of the Union address. Last night, we took you to a Michigan county that is normally very accurate in its presidential picks. We asked folks there what they're expecting from the State of the Union address last night. Well, tonight, senior correspondent Mike Tobin is back in Van Buren County, Michigan, to get reaction.
If there was a common desire from both the right and the left in Van Buren County, Michigan, they wanted a message from the president that would bridge the bitter political divide in the U.S.
I thought it was upbeat, and he touched on all the things he'd done, and he laid out a plan for the future.
There were some points in there that I think are points for unity. There's some points where he was staking out his ground.
And a woman who promised there was nothing this president could say to win her over.
There were a couple of things that I agreed with. One thing that I had not heard from him before was the rehabilitation for people leaving prison, which I think is a really good idea.
Trump supporters said the absence of unity belongs to the left, most evident when the Congressional Black Caucus sat stone-faced with positive news about minority jobs.
To sit there when they said that black unemployment was the lowest in history and not one of them reacted positively to it, to me is stunning.
Trump opponents say there's nothing to cheer.
Trump's behavior and his attitude, his words, have shown him to be a racist.
The president's use of guests got positive and negative reviews.
It seemed to me that he was kind of taking advantage of that to make a point, and they were so clearly in deep grief.
I was impressed with how he was able to weave every one of his guests into a great storyline and how that affected his policies.
When it came to immigration, that is when the president got no points for being a unifier.
He could have been a little more careful about the MS-13 part, just about explaining that not everyone coming from south of the border is necessarily MS-13.
Michiganders were hoping to hear plans about investing in crumbling infrastructure, glad to hear plans about combating opioid addiction, and of course in a state famous for struggles to maintain employment in the automotive industry. This talk of moving Chrysler jobs from Mexico to the Wolverine State got their attention. Brett?
Mike Tobin in Michigan. Mike, thanks. Up next, President Trump signs an executive order keeping the Guantanamo Bay prison open. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 2 in Detroit with the start of the final sentencing hearing for former USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University Dr. Larry Nassar. The judge says roughly 60 victims want to confront Nassar or have a statement read in court relating to sexual abuse at an elite Lansing area gymnastics club. Nassar has already been sentenced in 2 other trials trials and is essentially already facing life in prison. Fox 5 in Las Vegas with new information about last year's mass shooting that left 58 people dead. An Arizona man says he was identified in court documents as a person of interest because he sold ammunition to gunman Stephen Paddock. There are also new questions about the shooting timeline and other aspects of that case. We will continue to cover it. And in Kansas City from Fox 4, the big story there tonight, shock and disappointment from hundreds of workers losing their jobs at Harley-Davidson. The motorcycle maker will close its Kansas City assembly plant next year. About 800 jobs will be lost there. Many workers say no one saw it coming. Others point to a significant downturn in sales. That's tonight's Outside the Beltway. From Special Report, we're outside the Beltway, too. In New York, we'll be right back. Two U.S. defense officials tell Fox News a test of an American missile defense system failed earlier today in Hawaii. It's the same type of anti-ballistic infrastructure the Pentagon would depend on to shoot down an intermediate-range North Korean ballistic missile. It was the second failure of an SM-3 anti-ballistic missile interceptor since June. President Trump intends to keep the terrorist detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, open for business. Gitmo. Former President Obama spent 8 years trying and failing to close it down. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin tells us from the Pentagon that means suspects could be sent to Gitmo for the first time in 10 years.
We're going to load it up with some bad dudes, believe me. We're going to load it up.
Candidate Donald Trump promised to reverse President Obama's decision to close Guantanamo Bay, which the last administration said terrorists used as a recruiting tool. It was among President Obama's first executive orders.
Guantanamo will be closed no later than 1 year from now.
Congress blocked efforts to close the facility. Last night, President Trump signed a new executive order giving Defense Secretary Mattis, who quietly visited the facility before Christmas, 90 days to recommend whether those captured on the battlefield should be sent to Gitmo for the first time in 10 years.
Terrorists are not merely criminals. They are unlawful enemy combatants. And when captured overseas, they should be treated like the terrorists they are.
Senator Lindsey Graham has been a loud proponent of keeping Gitmo open.
I thought the president showed a determination as commander-in-chief to win a war that we can't afford to lose.
That's going to be used by every terrorist group worldwide against us.
Guarded by 1,500 U.S. troops, 41 prisoners remain at Guantanamo Bay, among them alleged 9/11 planner Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. 730 detainees have been transferred to 59 countries since 2002. 122 former detainees returned to the battlefield.
In the past, we have foolishly released hundreds and hundreds of dangerous terrorists, only to meet them again on the battlefield, including the ISIS leader, al-Baghdadi.
Former State Department officials who worked tirelessly to close Gitmo say terrorists are more likely to be convicted in a federal court.
The shoe bomber, the underwear bomber, the Boston Marathon bombers, all tried in federal court, all convicted, all housed in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, not a single security incident.
It costs the U.S. taxpayer about $450 million a year to keep Gitmo open. In 16 years, despite 7 active prosecutions, there have been no convictions by these military tribunals. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thanks. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis is considering a ban on personal cell phones at the Pentagon. This comes after data from personal fitness training apps has shown up on the internet, revealing the locations of military personnel. Pentagon spokeswoman says no official decision has been made yet. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly says the California high school teacher whose anti-military rant went viral should, quote, go to hell. Kelly made that remark on Fox News Radio with Brian Kilmeade.
Says the military are a bunch of dumb blanks. They're not high-level thinkers. They're not academics. They're the lowest of the low. They are not talented people. What is your reaction to that, knowing that he's teaching a bunch of 17-year-olds this?
Well, I think the guy ought to go to hell. I just hope he enjoys the liberties and the lifestyle that we have fought for.
Gregory Salcido of El Rancho High School has been placed on administrative leave and removed from all assignments relating to his position on the Pico Rivera City Council. Will President Trump release that surveillance memo over strong objections from the FBI, the Justice Department? If he does, what will be the reaction? We'll ask our panel when we come back.
We saw it in 2001, again in 2008, and we're seeing it again today. But this bubble is potentially the worst I've ever seen.
It's going to be the mother of all crashes.
We have huge asset bubbles everywhere. The warning signs are out there.
You can see it in this chart. You have to hedge now against it.
When will this bubble burst? Call now to receive this free screaming indicator report. This one chart has forecasted every major correction in the past 20 years. Find out what it's saying now.
Gold has been money for 6,000 years, and at no point in history has gold ever been worth zero.
Owning gold and silver is a great way to be prepared.
Call now to get this screaming indicator report, our precious metals investor guide, and get prepared with up to $2,000 in free gold or silver from Lear Capital. Don't wait. The information is free and there's no obligation to purchase. Call 1-800-511-1960. 1-800-511-1960.
Long John Silver's lets you skip your trip to the same old and indulge in the different new. Like our classic Alaskan cod and shrimp basket for just $5.99. Change up what you're used to at Long John Silver's.
I love Ebates. I have made $511.34. It's the easiest thing. You shop and you get money. There's no hassles, no gimmicks, nothing.
Join today and get a $10 bonus at ebates.com.
Hi, I'm Barry Sloan with NewTek, your business solutions company. Does your business need money? Whether you need $10,000 or $10 million, you can count on NewTek, the nation's largest non-bank government-guaranteed lender. NewTek can help your business expand and grow. With a simple phone interview, we can pre-qualify you in just 48 hours. And with rates as low as 6%, you can see why so many businesses turn to NewTek. To see how easy getting a loan can be, contact NewTek, your business solutions company, today.
At Wayfair.com, we think that when the big stuff ships free, it's just better.
Cover better, brunch better, crunch better, rock better, roll better, whoa better, dream better, clean better, yeah, better!
Oh, Wayfair has free shipping. Game changer.
Fast better, free better, everything's better when
Get
it's
free shipping on orders over $49. Shop better at Wayfair.com.
Wayfair, you've got just what I need.
Have you ever seen something so beautiful that all you could say was, wow? Beaches, Turks, and Caicos, where anything is possible because everything is included. Wow. Get up to 65% off. Call 1-800-BEACHES.
Look, you can refinance and pull cash out of your house with absolutely no closing costs. Why are you paying high interest rates for a car loan, credit card, or anything else you can think of? Your house is your bank. Make the cash call at 855-890-CASH.
Let's release the memo. Oh, yeah, don't worry. 100%.
Our national security lawyers in the White House that work for me, work for the president, they're slicing and dicing it, looking at it so that we know what it means and what it understands.
Did you see it?
He wants everything out so the American people can make up their own minds. And if there's people to be held accountable, then so be it. It'll be released here pretty quick, I think, and the whole world can see it.
Nothing is so repugnant and frightening as the Republican all-out assault on law enforcement, and particularly our FBI.
There really hasn't been this much coverage of a memo no one's seen publicly, I don't think, ever. This memo is likely coming out, but the FBI pushing back, releasing a statement saying the FBI takes seriously its obligations to the FISA court, its compliance with procedures overseen by career professionals in the Department of Justice and the FBI. We are committed to working with the appropriate oversight entities to ensure the continuing integrity of the FISA process. With regard to the House Intelligence Committee's memorandum, the FBI was providing provided a limited opportunity to review this memo on the day before the committee voted to release it. As expressed during our initial review, we have grave concerns about material omissions of fact that fundamentally impact the memo's accuracy, to which the House Intel Chair, Devin Nunes, responded with this statement: the memo contains all the relevant facts on FISA abuse. After fighting our demands for these documents for months, the FBI and DOJ now seem to be going through a series of increasingly ridiculous, increasingly desperate excuses to avoid transparency. So where are we on all this, and what does it mean? Let's bring in our panel. Former CIA analyst and nationally syndicated radio host Buck Sexton, Philip Bump, politics reporter for The Washington Post, and Bill McGurn, mainstream columnist for The Wall Street Journal. Okay, Buck, the arguments, the FBI clearly laying down a marker here saying this is what they feel, Chris Wray and others.
Large federal bureaucracies are always going to spend at least some of their energy and time defending themselves, especially in circumstances where there could be something embarrassing that comes out. Now, as you've pointed out, we haven't seen the memo yet, so we're doing a lot of debating of something that we don't have the full facts on. But I would just note that at this point, what is really the other option? Are we just going to pretend that this hasn't happened, this national discussion isn't ongoing, and we're not going to see what's in this memo? If someone wants to talk about undermining faith in institutions, it would seem to me that withdrawing Congress's ability and obligation to do oversight here and then hoping that this just goes away is the worst of all options. The better option is for it to come out. Democrats can respond. The FBI can add the context that they think is necessary, and the American people can finally know there's a presidency at stake here.
Speaker Ryan seemed to indicate that the Democratic version of the memo is going to go through the same process and likely will come out as well, having the members see it first. Dianne Feinstein, Senator Feinstein says it's clear the goal is to undermine the special counsel's investigation. If transparency were the objective, Republicans would support releasing the Democratic memo simultaneously, but instead they're blocking it. There's no excuse for playing politics with the highly classified information. The president shouldn't place personal or partisan interest above our national security. I mean, I think I explained the series of events as the speaker describes them going through this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the question that sort of overhangs all of this is the question of urgency. What is the urgency at play here? Why is it that the memo, to the point that Buck just made, yes, if you release the memo, then this information is out there. This is the argument that Chief of Staff John Kelly made this morning. But the FBI has expressed concerns about the contents of the memo repeatedly on more than one occasion. Even today, the Department of Justice, Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, indicated that he shared those concerns that the FBI had. And the question, I think, the broader question here is, and the question that I think you see reinforced by what Senator Feinstein just said, is why isn't it the case that there is a unified document that comes out potentially from the Republicans and the Democrats articulating what concerns there may be with the FISA process and have that be the thing that is presented to the public instead of what is admittedly, I think on all sides, the work product of the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee.
Bill.
Yeah, no, I think that the FBI's argument is ridiculous. For one thing, they've shifted the argument. They used to say it was sources and methods. Now they're saying basically it would be material embarrassing to us. This is the Colonel Jessup argument from A Few Good Men. The American people can't handle the truth. I think people need to see. We have two big questions over all this. Did Donald Trump collude with the Russians to steal the election in 2016? And did the FBI and DOJ put their fingers on the scale? Now remember, this is also Christopher Wray in his testimony for confirmation spoke about how he couldn't give Congress information because it was classified. This gets us backwards. You know, the FBI is accountable to we the people through the Congress, not the other way around.
Buck, it seems like it's coming to a head. We're hearing it could be tomorrow that this all moves forward. The president indicated as he was walking out of the State of the Union address, 100% it's coming out. What do you think the fallout will be if the FBI objections, you know, if it really does make the FBI and the DOJ look as bad as some Republican lawmakers suggest it does?
Well, I think that gets us into a critical distinction that the White House and others have been trying to make for a while now, which is that there is no war on the FBI. There is no effort to undermine wholesale the Department of Justice and all that it does. This is about the actions of a few individuals that were in very senior levels at both those institutions and bringing them to light oversight so that there can be accountability. There has to be. To the point that was just made, Congress has oversight here. These are not a separate and independent branch of government. And so that's why I think the transparency issue here, there really doesn't seem to me to be a worthwhile counter-argument. I'm not seeing it, especially given that now they're saying, well, we need our own memo to come out. Well, is it that it was classified, or is it that you want your own say?
Right. Trying to separate it, though, from the special counsel's investigation seems a little tough. The Speaker tried to walk that line yesterday. It's all interconnected here, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems to be. And again, we've said this 100 times, but we don't know what's in the memo, so it's a little hard to say. We don't know what we don't know. Exactly. But that said, it is clear that one of the concerns that has been raised about this memo is the extent to which the White House in particular is enthusiastic about its release because it will cast doubt upon the entire process that President Trump is facing. That is clearly an aspect to it. And so I think that Speaker Ryan was trying to be deliberate in saying this is something separate from that to try and erase that sense that may be out there. I mean, all of that said, I mean, I think that we're being asked essentially by politicians to trust that they are the objective actors here, whereas the trained FBI officials who are trained to act objectively are the ones that are acting on a partisan basis. I think that's a tough sell for a lot of the American public.
The only problem is it changed with these text messages. And when the text messages came out, it painted a different picture.
Yeah, look, the IRS before
I'd rather hear people concerned not about urgency, but about truth. And there are serious questions raised about the FBI. If the FBI misrepresented information in a FISA court, the premier law enforcement agency in the world, that is a big deal, because if they change the 302 forms, which are the interview forms, that is a big deal that gets to the heart of the government. I mean, to me, it's worse than if a politician's corrupt. If a politician's corrupt, it's one thing. If these objective institutions, and I just find it so strange that never have so many fought so hard to prevent so much information from coming out. It seems to me that all the arguments, whether it's lack of context or that it was put together, I want to know whether it was true. And if it requires more information,
the raw intel, or
the answer to me, I want to see the Democratic memo. I want to see the IG report. I want to see it out. And remember, this is an FBI that has fought giving this information, and the only reason that they acceded to it is because they were threatened. The director was threatened with the contempt vote in Congress.
This won't be the end of this discussion. Next up, the GOP agenda: retiring members, today's train crash, all of it after the State of the Union address. Keep it here.